My name is John William Richards III. I'm an admissions officer at Yale-NUS. I'm from Augusta, Georgia, very much through and through. I lived there my entire life. All three of my houses have been within a 5-minute drive of each other. I think my accent doesn't necessarily portray that in a lot of ways. I'm often given away by the words and the phrases I use. I told somebody something was cattywampus, and they were like, "That's not a real word." And I said, "Yes, it is. It means it's crooked." Being from Augusta, we often say Augusta is the world's largest small town. I can't go to the grocery store and not see 7 people I've known for my entire life. So John, as a kid, really enjoyed kind of being on his own. Hours where I'd spend, 3 or 4 hours making a potion, and it was, berries, grass, and some pond water, and that's what I worked on for hours. I actually did what in the industry we now call suiciding. I only applied to one university. Got back in the car and kind of exhausted, as this was like the 12th college we'd been to. My dad said, "Well, what did you think?" And I said, "I'm going to go here." So I went to Swanee, the University of the South. It was the right space for me. It was still very much a context of what I knew and where I'm from. It's the University of the South. Not everyone's from the South, and there's a lot of international students, but it felt comfortable, but it was a hugely liberating environment as well. It was purely academic, and the discussions at the fraternity houses where, I actually watched someone get into a fist fight over Thoreau. University life, John, was very committed. I don't like having holes in my schedule. I would get up at 5 a.m., go to a morning swim practice, but then, I'd go to breakfast, I'd go to morning classes, most language classes were 8 a.m. classes, so I'd go to language class, and then I'd do class all day, and then I'd actually have meetings during the afternoon. And so having meetings until 10 o'clock at night, because I also had afternoon swim practice and I had everything else, the thing that I learned was that even at 11 o'clock, and that time from 11 to 3 a.m., I still enjoyed reading my text for class. Oh man, swimming was great. I still love swimming. Swimming has always been a time, and I think swimming's a unique sport in that most of practice is spent underwater, talking to no one, you can't hear anyone, and you're counting laps. And so I wrote most of my essays in the pool. My best friends have generally revolved around the pool, the people I get to know the best, and when you're naked for 6 hours with someone else, you really get to know them quite well. There's nothing to hide. So my entire life, since I was 6 years old, I told everyone I was going to be a Supreme Court justice. I was going to be Justice Richards, and I was actually going to be Chief Justice Richards. I had an LSAT date, I had everything, and I was going to law school, and I was going to change the world by changing the U.S. Of course, the educated version of that is you can't do that. I didn't love actually experimenting with the law. I loved what the law had the capacity to relegate into society. And for me, it became very clear that I needed to be able to think in a more, if you put it in an academic discipline, anthropological model or a social science model, and say, I'm observing, I'm seeing, I'm taking in, and now I want to produce, and now I want to impact. The thing that I really kind of stood out for me when I first came to Singapore was it is a space where community exists regardless of how you look or where you're from. And so going into, an Indian pastry stall when I first got here, there was a very old Indian grandmother who was making Deepavali treats. And long story short, it came to the end where she was yelling at her grandkids and turned to me and said, "Well, if my grandkids don't learn, would you like to?" But I think part of it is that you're invited into society, and there's a way to do that, and you're not excused from being nice or being a person just because you're not from this society.